Liberty Nation. Truth is making a comeback.
Hi, Lisa Donner here for Liberty Nation, and with me today is Scott Cosenza, our legal affairs editor and chief constitutional legal expert at libertynation.com. Welcome, Scott.
Hi, Lisa.
I understand you had an interesting weekend with Stormy Daniels, but I digress. You'll have to watch another one.
People can listen to Tim Donner's radio show. I can't even believe it. I totally blanked. We have to cut that. That's so horrible.
Okay. Oh. No, we don't. LibertyNation.com. LibertyNation.com. All right.
For all of my Stormy Daniel coverage, which does include an in-person account of her at an exotic club in Steel City, Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania.
Yeah, which, by the way, Stormy did show up, right?
Yes.
Okay. And meantime, that you can catch Liberty Nation Radio on our website, libertynation.com, and also on the Radio America Network. Now, to the task at hand. Special Prosecutor Robert Mueller has reportedly threatened to subpoena President Trump if the president refuses to be interviewed by special counsel. Let's discuss subpoenas.
Okay, so there are two types of subpoenas generally. There are subpoenas for things, and there is a subpoena for testimony. So a subpoena for things may say, come down to the courthouse and bring all your bank statements and your telephone records and your accounting books because we're investigating you for some crimes, and this is evidence that we want to consider in evaluating that. And then there's testimonial subpoenas, which require you to come down to the courthouse and give testimony. And that's the kind of subpoena that we're talking about here with Mr. Trump. This would be a grand jury subpoena that would require Mr. Trump to come and sit before a grand jury and have Robert Mueller or one of his seconds ask questions in front of that grand jury. Now, grand jury proceedings are different than sort of what most people have in mind when they think of court proceedings. And the chief reason for that is that a person who is subject to a grand jury testimony does not have the benefit of having their attorney with them. They go into that room without an attorney. It would just be Robert Mueller or other prosecutors and the grand jurors themselves. And they can ask anything. And I think it was Saul Wachtel was his name, the famous New York judge who said that any prosecutor could indict a ham sandwich. The idea being that in that room, the prosecutor controls the process exclusively. They're like a mini dictator almost. And the grand juries have a tendency to just sort of do what they say rather than act independently, which is actually within their power and their purview. But it's just so seldom done that we consider it sort of a dead letter.
Scott, I assume presidents have been subpoenaed before in the history of the United States of America.
3 times. Jefferson, Nixon, and Clinton. What a trio there, right? So Jefferson was subpoenaed to testify in Aaron Burr's treason trial, I think. In any case, he declined to provide his own testimony, but did submit, I believe, written documents. President Nixon was subpoenaed pursuant to the Watergate investigation, and he resisted the subpoena, and he instead of providing the actual tapes, the Watergate tapes that he made in the Oval Office that prosecutors wanted to review, he provided transcripts, and those transcripts were not an accurate representation of the tapes. And in a unanimous decision, an 8-0 decision, with I think Rehnquist recusing himself because he had worked for Nixon, the Supreme Court ruled that the president was required to submit that material. Now, if we go back a second to talk about the different kinds of subpoenas, so he wasn't asked for testimony, right? He was asked for materials, and he provided them. And the Supreme Court ruled he had to provide them, and he did. Now, with Clinton, he was subpoenaed to give testimonial evidence. And it seemed like he was sort of proceeding to a point where he was going to refuse and there might be a challenge. But right at the last minute, he agreed. They made a deal with some limiting aspects of the time and place and demeanor and all that kind of thing. And he actually did submit voluntarily, not under a subpoena, but voluntarily to an examination. So Trump would be the first, if he was in fact subpoenaed and did testify, he would be the first sitting president to ever do so.
Okay, so what can Trump do if he is subpoenaed? Does he have to show up? Can he still write something in? What are his options? What would Rudy be telling him now?
Well, I don't know what Rudy would be telling him. I'll just leave that there.
But honestly, Rudy was a prosecutor. I mean, he knows how this game works. That's probably one of the reasons why Trump hired him. He knows how the whole prosecution deal works and how it goes down.
That's true, but this is so atypical, Lisa, that even a person who does have significant experience, although a long time ago, a significant experience like Mr. Giuliani, I don't know that there's not a playbook here that, we can say, well, this is what you do in this situation. Nobody knows what you do in this situation. It's never presented itself. The options are, and I've been reading and paying a lot of attention to Alan Dershowitz, who's been talking a lot about this, and I value his analysis. And he thinks that Trump, his best bet would be to challenge the subpoena. He would get 3 sort of whacks at that apple, first at the district court, then at the appellate court, and then at the Supreme Court, and each one of which could say he doesn't have to answer these questions. The other thing would be to say that he will answer some questions, but not others that are the purview of basically his activities as president, one of the co-equal branches. But one of the things that nobody's talking about, Lisa, and I think is kind of an interesting aside, is the courts are the ones that issue the subpoena. So the prosecutor goes to the court and says, I would like to have this witness brought before the court for testimony. And the subpoena doesn't come from Mueller's office. It would come from the court itself. But the co-equal branches of government, the how those are worked out is decided in the Constitution. So it's not up to a judge to say what a president must and must not do, it seems to me. And at the same time, there's the additional complication, which is that really Robert Mueller works for the president. He is an executive employee. So then you have the situation, sort of an added layer, where the courts would say, well, why are you, this is your guy who's doing this, right? This has nothing to do with us. So those are some wrinkles. I would expect that Donald Trump would not go and testify to the grand jury precisely because he has the tendency, as we all know, to sort of run off at the mouth and go off the script, which is really death in a proceeding like this with an experienced prosecutor like Robert Mueller. I mean, he would just need a legal pad and a pencil and a half an hour alone, I think, with Mr. Trump before he could come up with some crimes to prosecute, just because of Trump running his mouth.
All right, but Mueller, essentially, we've appointed an uber supreme judicial czar when we've appointed Mueller. I mean, he seems to be able to do anything he wants. So my question is, if the Supreme Court or the district court, you said it's the district court, the Supreme Court, what's the third? The
district court, then the appellate court, and then the Supreme Court.
Okay. As you look at the district court and the appellate court, we know about the makeup of the Supreme Court. What do you see in the makeup of those two courts? I mean, we're not dealing with the Ninth Circus out on the West Coast. So what are we really dealing with here?
This would be the D.C. Circuit Court of Appeals. There have been a number of Obama appointees to that court over the years. And whether or not it would break down over sort of party lines remains to be seen. Judges are political beings, but they also, by and large, have fidelity to the rule of law, I think. And they're I hesitate to just think, well, if it's a judge appointed by a Democrat, then they're going to vote against, what would be perceived as against Mr. Trump's interests, and then the opposite for Republicans. So I would caution against that type of analysis. I think the better analysis is what constitutionally are they going to think that is required by the branches here, and that's the big mystery.
All right. So when we started our discussion, you talked a little bit about a grand jury. Is Trump really going in front of a grand jury?
Well, that's what this would be for. The subpoena would be to appear before a grand jury and be questioned by one or more prosecutors before the grand jury. That's the kind of subpoena we're talking about here.
All right. Then I guess I'm interested in, where is the pool of people for the grand jury coming from?
Right. D.C. But it doesn't matter.
Okay.
It could be the most. It could be the most Trump country, reddest of red places. And I mean, where would that be? I don't even know. But you pick it. That's the place where. Again, this goes back to the ham sandwich remark, Lisa. The reason why is because there is no adversarial process in that room. It's not like Mr. Mueller or his seconds would make an argument about Mr. Trump's culpability, and then Mr. Giuliani or Mr. Sekulow could then make an argument to the court or the jury about how that doesn't implicate Mr. Trump or is in fact non-criminal. There's just one-sided. It's a one-sided argument. And if you can't make that case, you're not worth your salt as a prosecutor. And I guarantee you, all of Mueller's people, including himself, can make that case. So that's why there's such danger there for Mr. Trump to go before the grand jury. And I think the smart money bet is that he probably will not do so through one of those avenues.
All righty. Well, thanks very much for the update. I know you're keeping close tabs on this. I'm going to go rogue and basically tell our viewers that Liberty Nation has a new app out for Android. So go to your Google Play Store, search on Liberty Nation, and pull down our new app. Our Apple app is coming, but Apple is taking its time. So for Scott Cosenza, Lisa K. Donner here, thanks for joining us for another LNTV. And don't forget to stop by libertynation.com, where truth is making a comeback.
Liberty Nation. News and commentary, minus the propaganda. libertynation.com.